you, Jes, so much for joining me here on the Made in Indy podcast. How are you?
So good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love your nose ring, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So talk to me a little bit about your background. I want to talk about your photography studio. I want to talk about what it was like just growing up and then relocating to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And just in this everything, because you're from the Bay, which I
Yes.
love the Bay. My best friend lives in Lake Merritt. I lived in LA for many
Nice.
years. What was it like growing up in the Bay?
You know, it was so good. Such a great experience. I only moved here because, it's California. It got really expensive to live there. So my whole family moved out here after I finished high school because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet. And so we thought, let's go somewhere affordable. But it was such a great experience growing up there. And, of course, it's so diverse and you have access to so much culture there. Any kind of food, any kind of cultural experience, everything is just so readily available. And then just California itself, the mountains, the ocean, everything is right there. So it was a really incredible experience. So I do get just a little claustrophobic sometimes being kind of landlocked here, but, I do love it here as well.
Have you been to the dunes? Because one part that I love about, I've never been to the dunes here in Indiana. I love Joshua Tree. I love the desert. That's my favorite part of California. And I was just saying maybe you can go to the dunes. What are your thoughts on the dunes in Indiana?
I really like it. It doesn't feel like you're in Indiana anymore. And that's
right,
not
exactly.
Indiana. It just doesn't look like the rest of it. I was up there recently and I love going up there to take photos sometimes. And there's a couple of beaches there that you seriously think you're on the ocean. And one of my favorite parts is where you can stand on this, on the Indiana side and you can see Chicago skyline.
Yes.
And
I think
it looks like there's an ocean between. Yeah, it's right up near there, like Beverly Shores area. It's so incredible. Yeah, I really like it there a lot. I'm trying to go up there again before it gets too cold.
We're pretty landlocked. It's pretty flat, but there are some areas that add a little bit of diversity, which I really like about Indianapolis. So talk to me about being a photographer. Talk to me about Never Not Studio. First and foremost, being in California, that really probably influenced, like you said, culturally and the diverse backgrounds of just the landscape. Is that what inspired you to go into a career of photography, or what inspired you to do that?
I wish I could say that it was a series of events that inspired me and that I made a choice for photography, but it kind of just fell into my lap. I've had a lot of various jobs throughout the years, but most recently before photography, I was a nurse. And
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
It just wasn't for me anymore. And I knew I wanted to change some things up. And so I was kind of debating, if I should get into a new line of work or go back to school or, figure out from there. So I took some time off from work and I got a camera just as a hobby. And I just got really obsessive with, capturing and remembering every single thing I was doing. And so I would take photos everywhere I'd go, and then I'd just share them on Instagram. A lot of it was usually food related. And
there's nothing wrong with some good food photography.
Exactly. And so there was a restaurant I used to go to a lot back then called Open Society in Broad Ripple. And they had a cafe, a bar, really great food. And that was, so I would take a lot of photos there. And so they ended up becoming my first client. They just saw some photos and said, hey, let's, how about we use these and you come in and we'll just start paying you for it. So had they not said that, it probably would have been quite a while before I felt confident that I should charge anyone.
Right.
But so that was my first client. And then I started to realize how much I really enjoy food photography specifically. And it just kind of started snowballing from there and I never stopped it. So
before you go any further, I want to touch on something that you said, because I think it's really important. The Made in Indy podcast really is a platform I created because I had come back from California, didn't recognize my city, and I needed a way to connect. And I think it's really important that when you're going through those byways, highways, lowways, whatever you want to call them, after making a transition, to follow your bliss. And sometimes the pieces really do come together in a way that you don't really even anticipate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's so many times that happens in people's lives. What made you continuously go down that particular path of saying, okay, I'll embrace this. Someone's asking me to do it. What was that inside of you? Was it a little still voice, or what was that made you go down the path to say yes to life?
Yeah, it was kind of just chasing like little bursts of excitement, basically, where I realized it wasn't until I took that time off from working like a 9 to 5 that I realized that I've always worked in kind of high stress, high anxiety situations. And I grew so used to that, I almost enjoyed it. Or, you know, it was just like chasing a thrill, but the end result of that was always that it left me feeling kind of terrible. And then I would, you know, chase the next workaholic thrill. And then in the moment I felt good, and then it would wash over. And then I was like not feeling so great again. And I realized with photography, it was like the high never really like came down. You know, it was just like, I either feel good or I feel great. And so as soon as someone was like, hey, what if, you know, this was a job you did with us? And I was like, well, doesn't seem like there's any reason to turn that down.
Right.
And then I started doing that, and I realized like, oh, this only continues to make me feel better. Right. And I don't feel like I don't demand anything from myself. I feel very free when I'm doing photography, and I don't put any expectations on myself to this degree of like, you know, kind of like this productivity culture that I find really toxic, you know, like enforcing certain demands on ourselves, like, oh, I have to be productive, I have to do this, I have to do that. With photography, it felt like if I worked an hour a day, or maybe even not at all, or 8 hours or whatever, I was just working to the point that I felt good, and when I was tired, I would stop. And I'd never felt so confident or comfortable with anything to that degree prior to photography. So
I love that. I think that is 100%. I follow this Instagram account called Nap Ministry. It's like taking a nap ministry. And it really talks about there's so much liberation and rest.
Absolutely.
Because when you're well rested, you come from a place that you're really pouring yourself into it. And like you said, if you're working 1 hour a day, or if you're working 8 hours a day, it's really just whatever the situation calls for. Yeah. I agree with that 100%. Absolutely. So let's talk about the name Never Not Studio. That's a very interesting name. How did you come up with the title for studio at Never Not Studio?
So for the first almost 4 years, my business was just, you know, Jes Nijjer photography. I just thought it would be easier, you know, someone knows me, they do a Google search, here comes my business information. It would just, a lot of photographers tend to kind of identify their business that way. But after that, I wanted to take my name out of it. It's also partly comes from a place of like, I am more than just a photographer, and my photography is more than just about who I am as a person. It's also, you know, reflective of the people that I'm working with. And you know, I try to, every shoot is different. Every job is different. You know, no two photos should look exactly the same. I don't mind if someone doesn't recognize that a photo is mine. You know, I kind of almost like that, rather than like, oh, I know that look, it must be her. If it's just like, oh, this is you too, I kind of appreciate that a little bit more. But I realized that regardless of the conversation I'm having, or the project I'm working on, or whatever life choice I'm making, travel, anything, I'm never not thinking about photography. I'm never not looking as if like I'm looking through a viewfinder. And
that's hot. That is a hot... I sounded like a 50-year-old man there. That's hot. No, that's really a hot take on it. I'm never not doing or in that space of this from the lens of creating. I love that. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And you know, it's kind of like there's certain things that we find comfort in, I think, to feel better about this kind of like toxic productivity culture, right? Where, you know, we'll either say like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Or people will say like, whatever you love the most, don't make that your work, because suddenly you won't enjoy it as a hobby. And there is a happy medium in between that. And there's just like not one size fits all. But for me, it works best if I'm never not thinking about photography. You know, when I'm traveling, I'm looking for where do I want to take a photo, or like I'll always just walk through a city as many blocks as I can. And, you know, by foot is the best way to get to know a city. And also I just like finding random things to photograph that aren't your tourist attractions. But if I don't think of it that way, it kind of dulls an experience for me. Now, of course, that's not true for everyone.
Right.
So I think it's just finding what works for you. You know, my job is also still my biggest hobby. It's just what I love to do. But at the same time, you know, there's been periods where I don't pick up my camera for 2 months straight. I just need a break, you know.
I just need
I don't want to, and that's, I still don't stop thinking in terms of photography. Like I'll look at a sunset and or I'll think like, oh, I would have probably shot it this way, and then I would have edited it like this, you know. But at the same time, I'm giving my physical body the rest and freeing up the time from actually doing that work. So yeah, that's kind of where that comes from. And
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's almost, and I think when you take a break, it's almost like when you go to a dinner that has like 7 courses, 8 courses, 9 courses. In between those courses, you have a palate cleanser, because it's a way to, and sometimes that's like coffee beans. Sometimes that's like, you know, some type of something just to cleanse your palate, because it's a way of you to just refresh your perspective, which I think is incredible. Now, this is kind of loaded question, but you can take a picture of anything, so this may vary based on what you're taking a picture of, but in your opinion, what makes a perfect photo? I know, isn't that loaded?
It's a little loaded, yeah. Actually, I was thinking about that yesterday, because I was like, oh, I know this is going to come up. Well, how am I really going to answer this? And I don't know that if there's anything prior to taking the photo that makes the best photo. I don't know that you can prepare for it. I think you just need to let it happen to you, you know? I think when people talk about sharpening their eye for photography, I don't think it's like so much like your physical eye. I think it's like your intuition, the eye and intuition is what you're sharpening. So it's less about, you know, what's like the coolest shot I can take here, like which, you know, parking garage am I gonna dangle my feet off of,
mural, where's a cool mural that I can get in front of
and that's not to say that those aren't cool or enjoyable. Like if you're enjoying that, absolutely go for that. But if it's just because that's like the cool or popular thing to do and you feel like you have to, skip that, you know. And it's funny you mentioned palette cleanser, because for me, I've always phrased it that way, that when I get in a bit of a rut and I feel like I'm just not loving the photos I'm taking, my palette cleanser is architecture. So I'll go and photograph that, and I feel like that resets me.
I love, that's actually, if you go to my personal Instagram, that's all I post. It's like really cool architecture, something super contemporary or something, you know. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And so, you know, and in using that as a palette cleanser over the years, I actually found that ends up being what I enjoy the most to photograph. You know, my artwork is focused in architecture, and then my actual, you know, my paid work is more in food and portraits. But, you know, and with that, I've found the perfect image is, there isn't one recipe, there's no one size. It's just whatever moves you in the moment. You know, sometimes it's finding symmetry, and that just like centers you throughout. And sometimes it's when things don't line up at all, and still appreciating that it still exists in nature, it still works, even though
wabi-sabi. That's called wabi-sabi.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love that. I think that's incredible. So then talk to me about, because, you know, coming from the Bay Area, then living in Indianapolis is a transition. How long have you been in Indianapolis?
I've been here 13 years now.
So in your opinion, what makes the Circle City unique? I love to ask that question just because I feel like everyone has a different vantage point. And for me, I think it's the people. The people make it unique for me. What makes the Circle City unique for you?
I'm really glad you asked, because I love talking about this, especially when I'm outside of Indianapolis or when there's someone new here. I think it's probably unique to the Midwest, but I'm going to narrow it down further and give special credit to Indianapolis for this, that it somehow maintains being a large city with like a village feel. where there's basically no strangers. And, you could, first of all, like if you have some regular places that you visit, like coffee shops, etc., you'll start to notice how many other regulars there are. And by like the third time you see someone, you feel like it's your responsibility to introduce yourself. That like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
all the
yeah.
time. We should know each other now, right? And, once you do that, you start to realize like, oh, look at that. We already have like 10 people in common. So it's so easy to get to know people here. It's super friendly, classic Midwest hospitality. And yet it's big enough that you can, get into any line of work. Like nothing is really out of reach here. I've noticed that with photography a lot, that it's small enough that I was comfortable starting a freelance photography business from the ground and building that just through knowing people, just by going into places regularly and saying, hey, you know me as your client now, I would love it if you were mine, and everybody just kind of gives you that benefit of the doubt that like, oh yeah, of course I know you, let's give it a trial. But at the same time, it's big enough that there's enough work for everybody to go around. So it's that community feel and everything. And I noticed that very much in the food industry. Within that, the coffee community is even smaller. And it's so tight knit. And I mean, Indianapolis has a surprising amount of coffee shops for its size.
I know.
Everyone is so supportive, and it's not competitive in a way that you would expect, so that just kind of speaks volumes for the city as a whole.
I agree. I couldn't agree with that more. Now, speaking in terms of this year, it's been an uncanny year.
Yeah.
As a creative, as a photographer, how has COVID affected your outlook on your work, on your business, and even how you approach projects? How has COVID kind of changed or altered, if at all, the way you approach your projects, and how's it affecting business?
Yeah, it has had a pretty significant impact. I won't lie. I'm not working the same way or as much as I would have been otherwise, of course. But the first few months, I'll be honest, it was pretty bleak. I felt pretty discouraged. I didn't pick up my camera for a few months. And it seemed like it was becoming more and more apparent, the kind of classism that dictates these things for us, the way artistry is considered not a real job, if you will. If someone says like, as a photographer, as a painter, as a musician, etc., I'm not getting the jobs that I need, or I'm not making the money, etc., people will almost tell you that like you should have chosen something else.
Yeah.
Right. And on the other hand, and it's easy to fall into that mindset of, maybe that's true. Maybe I should do something else, or maybe people are right, and that's just a trade-off for choosing artistry. And I don't think that it is, because realistically, when things get this tough, this challenging, and this ugly, like art is the only thing that's really getting us through.
Don't start preaching, Jes. Don't start.
Like if you think about the way that most of us communicate now, like however small or big, social media is some part of most of our lives. Or just media in general. And so much of the way we communicate now is dictated through art, like sharing messages through art, not just the message alone. And it gets further that way with people. We're able to build platforms as artists, and then use those platforms to share messages, and let the art speak even greater than just the message itself. It's a metaphor. It kind of tugs at something inside you that maybe just written word doesn't always do. And so seeing how much we're all relying on art right now to get through this, whether it's just seeing things on Instagram, whether it's through film, through, conversations like this. I mean, it's all
right.
art. And this is what gets us through, not, 9 to 5 clocking in and out.
You know, it's funny because I went to school for theater, right? And you went to school for nursing, which is completely different. But that was something that I had to undertake, that conversation of art as a career, like that conversation where people say, you're going to be an actor. Oh, do you mean you're going to be a waiter? Oh, you're going to be a this, you're going to be a that. And you just come to that mindset where you just kind of say, that is someone that could be speaking from a place of fear, maybe speaking from a place that they didn't trust themselves enough to go and pursue their dreams. And, you know, the world is made up of a vast different types of people, and I respect that. But I think it's really important because, like you said, it's the literature that gets us through. It's the paintings, it's the photography, it's all of those things that really tell the story of the human condition. And that's what a photographer really does. They capture the essence of that, which I believe. So talking about this year, I really want to know, what has 2020 revealed to you so far?
You know, everything is so fleeting. There's no constants. There's no such thing as making plans anymore, really. You know, like, you can try.
Which is good. You can cancel plans in a second now. No.
And even just, you know, our life goals, like, of course it's good to have some general idea, but realistically, nothing's promised. We don't know what's happening at all, right? Day by day. And I'm focusing more on making sure that every individual day is fulfilling and that I'm going to bed content, rather than, if I work hard now, then in 5 years, you know, who knows what happens in 5 years? Maybe we're still in lockdown in 5 years. Who knows? Yeah. So making each individual day count more is suddenly so crucial. And at the same time, I think, you know, kind of speaking to the way Indianapolis works as a community and the role that artists have in that, you know, it's more prevalent than ever that we can't do anything just alone. There's no just self-serving. You know, we're in a lot of the predicaments that we're in right now because we just can't seem to get some people to think for the greater good, or think for their neighbors, think for others, you know? And that's kind of just the condition of America as it stands. You know, I think that's what we're seeing is, like, even though, like, capitalism has found a way to rebuild itself from its ashes, that's kind of why we're in this mess time after time. Small businesses will fail, big businesses will not, or, you know, they can be better. But that's, I think, the real fault in America is that that dynamic has kind of instilled this mentality of, like, me first. And we find that
I say it's an opera. Me.
Yes. Yeah. And in countries and communities where that's not the case, and you always think for someone else first, those areas are thriving and they're doing much better than us. They're recovering better than us. They're coming together. They at least have more comfort than we do in ours. And so, you know, whether that's just with my family or friends or whatever community I can find anywhere, you know, I'm noticing that wherever there's, like, artistry involved, there's a sense of looking out for others. And where there's that, it's easier to get through day by day, and there's honestly just fewer problems.
And there's more support. Do you have a practice that you do to keep you centered? Obviously, it can be photography. But is there something that you do, knitting, praying, running, anything that you do that has kept you centered throughout this year?
Walking is a big part of it, just being outside. I love taking advantage of that as much as I can. You know, I love walking through, like, the 100 acres behind the IMA and stuff like that. Just being outdoors. I think best when I'm speaking. A lot of times I'll, like, get to chatting with a friend and I'm like, oh, so that's how I feel about that. It's just like, I'm hearing this with you, you know? So that's very cathartic to me. And so I love going on walks with my friends any chance I get. That probably keeps me grounded more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I think being outside, it gets you out of your mind and into the world, which is the point of all of this. Do you have a specific favorite photo or a favorite series of photos that you've ever worked on? And if so, why were they your favorite?
Well,
or do you love everything? You just love them all. You love everything you take.
I won't say I love everything, but I appreciate everything. Uh, yeah. There are a lot of photos I've taken that I do not love, and I don't even actually enjoy looking at them anymore. It's a little cringeworthy, but I appreciate that that's, you know, part of the process to getting here. One of my favorite photos, I took it in LA last year, and that was one of the earliest times that I realized that I love architecture beyond just it being a palette cleanser. That's just like the thing that I'm drawn to the most. And it was a photo I took of a building, and I didn't intend for it to happen. I saw this in editing that I somehow was able to perfectly line up some triangles to the corners. And so now I always tell my friends that I'll feel like I've made it when that ends up in like a geometry textbook.
I love that.
Yeah,
Were you downtown? Where were you in Los Angeles?
Just right downtown.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they have great. It's beautiful, beautiful architecture.
A lot of great architecture there. Yeah, palm trees and architecture everywhere. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, everywhere. Now, if someone was interested in a career pathway as a creative, what advice would you give them?
Well, with photography specifically, I feel like there's a lot of less than ideal advice out there for beginners. You know, there's a lot of text, a lot of videos that you could watch, and they wouldn't necessarily steer you wrong, but it would just take you down like a very long winding path that you don't need to go down. You know, I don't think that there is like a great camera to begin with. You know, if you're getting a good deal on a camera, that's the best camera to begin with, you know.
Oh, that's good advice. That is good advice. Yeah. Use what you got, make what you need, and start small. Love it.
Yeah. My first few years, I used a camera that I got off of Groupon on sale, you know, and I think it's more about just sharpening your vision, your intuition with it, and you know, I don't think it's a bad thing if like the first 10,000 photos you take, you don't really love any of them. Like if you continue to find ways to improve, or you're just like, you know, you feel that the limitations from your camera, that's really a good thing. Because you're finding so many ways to grow. But if the first camera you get, the first lens you get, you know, you're content and you feel like, oh, okay, great, I'm doing good already, you're probably not growing very much, you know? So I think feeling those kind of growing pains is really important, and learning from, you know, the bottom up. Because I don't love jumping straight to shortcuts. Like my process has all been self-taught because I need to know what it is that I'm using a shortcut to. So if I don't have that underlying knowledge, it feels like it's kind of a weak base. But, you know, don't worry about what camera you're getting. Don't worry about the lens, any of that. Just practice. Try every different setting. With photography specifically, I would say the only one thing is get to know your device in and out. Shoot manually. You know, try every single setting, every which way, to where it becomes so intuitive to you. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
Yeah. It should
is
be
there
like
a place
an extension of your body.
No, and that's really what it is. And I think that people that get into that, it's almost like a trance, I call it. Sometimes when I'm writing or when I'm editing or when I'm doing something, I'm in a space where I'm here, but I'm not really here. I'm just, it's an extension. The device is an extension of myself. So I agree with that 100%. Is there a space in Indianapolis or Indiana that you just fell in love with, you know, to take pictures? Or because there's really some beautiful places in Indianapolis, like we talked about the dunes, the new fields. It used to be IMA. There's any downtown, even when you come out to the suburbs, there's so much. Is there a place that you've kind of fallen in love with taking pictures?
Yeah. So the 100 acres, you know, behind Newfields, that's one of my favorite places just to be, but also for photographs. Like I love doing portraits there very much year round. Just you get so many different feels. It's like every representation of Indiana lives within this park, basically. You know, it feels like. You know, you could feel like you're just in a meadow. You could be like deep in the woods. You've got a lake there. So you get a really good variety there. I love that. It's deeply peaceful. But my other favorite is, you know, we were talking about the dunes, and I really liked Beverly Shores, but even more about a half hour west of there is this town called Portage. And they have a really nice like rocky beach and like this, this like boardwalk and everything. And it was so beautiful. And there's like a little lighthouse there. And I must have spent, the first time I went there, I spent like 4 hours taking photos there.
Wow.
And it was just like redundant too. Like, I looked at it later and I was like, this is 800 photos of kind of the same thing, but that's okay. But it was really enjoyable, really peaceful. And it's just so beautiful up there. And again, it's one of those things that you wouldn't think is in Indiana because it doesn't look like the rest of it, but it's really beautiful.
I love that. Yeah. Before I let you go,
yeah.
2 things, because I just wanted to know this personally. This conversation is about to get really hippy dippy, but I've got to know, what is your sign? I've been sitting here trying to figure it out because did you say Taurus?
No. I said I knew you were going to ask that.
Yeah, yeah, California, right?
So what's your guess?
Okay, so I would say Taurus is too on the nose, and that's not, I really don't think that's what the vibe I'm getting. It's something that's so grounded, but something that's, okay, I'm just going to take a guess. Something that's grounded with a vision. Aquarius?
No, I've never gotten that before. That's surprising, actually.
Okay, so now what is it? Now I gotta know.
Leo. And yeah.
So you just had a birthday.
I did.
Yeah. Happy belated birthday.
Yeah, thank you. About like half my chart is Leo. So it's pretty aggressively Leo. But I'm a Capricorn rising. So Capricorn rising. Yeah.
I love that so much. Gemini here.
I love Gemini so much. I have very good, close Gemini friends.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Where can people get in contact with you to book you for services, for consultation? Where can people find you in Never Not Studio?
Yeah, I am very accessible through my Instagram and my website. My Instagram is Just Keep Swimming, Jes with 1 S. And my website is just my first and last name, Jes Nijjer, Jes Nijjer.
Love it. Okay. Well, I will have a link to all of these amazing handles on my website. And I'm so happy that you were able to join me for this conversation today, because I think it's really been so cool just talking to creatives, and we need to take a trip in Indiana somewhere and take pictures. That's one thing I do miss is good, in LA I had such a great group of friends that would know how to take a good picture of me. It's all about having a friend that knows how to take a good picture of you. So
100%. Absolutely. Let's go to Portage sometime.
Let's go to Portage. Let's hang out somewhere. Let's grab a drink. But I would love that so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. This has been so fun.
It's my pleasure. And I will talk again very, very soon. Thanks for being on the show.
Great. Thank you.